Perfect.
How is it going, Bears fans? Welcome back to another episode of Beared Down Uncut, the show where we talk everything Bears every day of the week. Today, in episode number 186 of Uncut, we're going to be discussing Darnell Mooney and his potential to be the wide receiver one in Chicago. As many of you know, the Bears wide receiver room is looking weak, so can Mooney step up and take a load of responsibility? We're going to be discussing whether or not he can do that, predicting his stats for the 2022 season, and also discussing what happens with this wide receiver room moving forward. Welcome back to the show, guys. Feels good to be back once again doing this. We're trying to get you guys a couple of videos a week. I think it's been a week since we recorded our last one. However, we're still going to try and fill in a little bit more content each and every week. It's not going to be every day, but doing our best, and it'll only continue to increase as we approach training camp here. But if you are new to the channel, wherever you may be listening and want new Bears content throughout the week, do us a favor, drop a like, subscribe, follow, and we've got some big things coming up for the entirety of the season. I am your host, Chris Malpe. Today, I am joined by my co-host, Parth Shaw. Parth, feels good to be back again. Training camp here in just about a week and a half. I'm sure you and I are going to be showing out, but how's it going, my man?
Doing great. Just been enjoying summer. Just got back from vacation, actually. So, it's been a while since I've recorded, so it's going to be a little rusty, but I'm excited to be back. There's going to be a lot of Bears football to talk about in the upcoming weeks. As you said, training camp is here in a week and a half, and it only just, unravels from that point on, as we'll have a lot more content to talk about. So.
Yeah, most definitely. It only spirals and continues to grow. So looking forward to getting out to training camp, probably with you within the next couple of weeks, and Family Fest with Jaylen and all these fun things. We're going to get to see this wide receiver group up close. Probably the talk of the offseason outside of Justin Fields has been this wide receiver group. And Darnell Mooney, obviously, is really the only consistent piece that the Bears are bringing in from last year to this year. As we all know, obviously, the Bears pass on a wide receiver with 2 of their second-round picks. They end up going with Jaquan Brisker, safety out of Penn State, Kyler Gordon, cornerback out of Washington. That secondary is looking good, but aside from them, on the opposite side of the ball, there are a lot of question marks. Allen Robinson left the team, heading over to the reigning Super Bowl champion Los Angeles Rams. Darnell Mooney is going to be at the top of the Bears depth chart. This video actually is inspired by a tweet I made yesterday talking about his Madden rating and how he got a 79 overall, and Terry McLaurin, who is obviously a better receiver, had worse stats, arguably, basically the same stat line as Mooney in 2021, and ended up 12 overalls higher. So there's already some Mooney disrespect. So we're here to talk about Darnell and his potential impact in 2022 today. Parth, taking a look at Mooney's last year in year 2, the former late round pick out of Tulane really showed up last season. He had 140 targets, 81 receptions for 1,055 yards, 13 yards per reception, and 4 touchdowns. He is stepping into the wide receiver 1 role in Chicago. There is a lot of debate as to whether or not he can succeed in this role, but I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think Darnell Mooney can step up this year in a huge critical year for Justin Fields and handle the wide receiver 1 responsibilities?
I think so. I thought what Darnell Mooney did last year was actually very surprising itself. Last year, we all expected Allen Robinson to be that wide receiver 1. And Darnell Mooney came in and showed out. Whenever the Bears needed yards, it was Darnell Mooney. Whenever Justin Fields needed to throw the ball to someone, it was Darnell Mooney. And we saw Darnell step up in games where he was playing some tough competition. I think Darnell, it's going to be a little bit tougher this year, as he's going to draw the best matchup every single game, which is obviously going to be a little bit more difficult, as before he had Allen Robinson, who was drawing that at least for the first half of the season. And I still think Darnell's really good wide receiver. I think he can be a wide receiver 1. However, he's going to need other guys to step up around him. because for him to be the wide receiver one, that means he's going to need another guy who can score touchdowns, as I don't see Darnell being that big touchdown threat receiver just yet, as in the red zone, he's a little bit smaller. I feel like he can create some space and get some big yards and be a big yard catcher for you and put up maybe 1,400 yards this year if Justin Fields can get him the ball. But I don't see him putting up 10 touchdowns or anything like that, in which the Bears will need someone who can step up, which is why I liked us trading for N'Keal Harry. I wasn't there for that video, but, N'Keal Harry brings that big body presence you can use in the red zone. So you just need to pair up the right guys besides Mooney, because Mooney can go off for 1,400 yards this year.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and agree with you, actually. I do think Mooney can handle the wide receiver one position. I currently would probably think of him as a top tier wide receiver two. I got to see it at wide receiver one. However, I do believe that he can do it. Mooney was recently ranked in a poll by Pro Football Focus as the 24th best receiver in the league heading into 2022. I have a lot of reasons for believing in Mooney and believing that he can do this. There are a lot of smaller receivers with Mooney's build, with Mooney's abilities that have taken up wide receiver one roles in past years. Take a look at someone like a Marquise Brown and what he was able to do on the Baltimore Ravens for a while. Someone like a Tyreek Hill, who is obviously a lot faster, you'd assume, than Mooney, but very similar build. Even someone who Mooney was compared to coming into the league, like a Stephon Diggs and what he's been able to do up in Buffalo. Your wide receiver one on a football team doesn't essentially have to be that Allen Robinson type wide receiver who can go up, has all the athleticism in the world, the catch radius, the speed, to be able to beat defenders in the secondary. So there is going to be a lot that falls on Mooney's shoulders this year. And even a receiver I just mentioned earlier, Terry McLaurin, similar to Mooney in a sense as well. I'm not saying Mooney, similar to Parth, is going to go out and score 12 touchdowns and have 1,500 yards this year. However, I do think he has proven throughout his 2 years in the league that, number one, he's only continuing to get better. And number two, he has been a consistent target for the Chicago Bears team and for Justin Fields specifically. So I'm looking forward to what Mooney can do moving forward. I do believe he can handle this wide receiver one position. Daniel Greenberg, a couple of days ago, tweeted out that Mooney had been going to Hallis Hall in the middle of the night when he had nothing going on, and practicing routes and working on his skill, crafting himself for this season. So I believe that Mooney not only really wants to prove a lot of people wrong, but genuinely I believe he will prove a lot of people wrong. I don't think he's going to put up top tier numbers by any means. However, I do believe that he can put up some great stats in 2022 as the number one target for this Bears team. Let's move into some stat predictions now for Mooney, because obviously in a year that Allen Robinson saw his worst production since entering the league, Mooney saw a great year in 2022. 81 catches, 1,055 yards, 13 yards per reception, on top of 4 touchdowns. Parth, you would assume with some guys out of town, like the Marquise Goodwin, like the Jimmy Graham, like the Allen Robinsons of the world, even though the Bears do have some interesting receivers down the depth chart, Mooney is going to have more opportunities to make big plays this year at the top of that depth chart. So what do you think his stat line could realistically look like this season in terms of receptions, receiving yards, and also touchdowns?
One guy I'm going to compare him to right now is it's going to be a big claim, but I'm going to say
You're
Cooper
going to say
Kupp.
Deebo Samuel or something. Oh, wow, Cooper Kupp. Okay.
In 2020, Cooper Kupp, before he had Stafford, Cooper Kupp had 900-ish yards. And then last year, he put up 1,900 yards, 1,947 to be exact. Darnell Mooney last year, he was at 1,000 something. I'm not saying he's going to put up 1,900 yards or anything, but I see him putting up around 1,500 yards this year, and that's just because of how much we're going to use him. Justin Fields is going to force feed Darnell Mooney the ball around 110, 120 for 120 receptions. I feel like I just feel like Darnell Mooney is going to be a big part of this offense. And if the Bears want to be any good on offense and any decent, which I expect them to be, because I think Justin Fields is going to have a pretty big year. Not something big flashy, but I think he's going to improve, and that's most what Bears fans want to see. And Darnell Mooney is going to be a big part of his improvement. And we met Darnell Mooney last year at training camp, and we know how dedicated he is to the craft, how much he cares about the game, and how much he just wants to grow. He also was a super nice dude, just a great character. I feel like he's got all the tools need to be successful here in Chicago, and he's got a big stage. There's no one that's even as close to being as good as him on this depth chart right now. So he's got a big chance to step up, and I think he will. I think he definitely can.
How many touchdowns you going to give him credit for? What do you think?
I'm going to say 7 touchdowns.
All right. I'm going to be a little bit more modest with my prediction. I do think this is a season, however, and I believe Allen Robinson did it 2 years ago, where Mooney, and I agree with you, Parth, is by far the best player on this wide receiver depth chart. There's definitely a gap to Byron Pringle, and then probably a gap after Pringle to the rest of everybody else. Yeah. But I do think, taking a look at what Allen Robinson did 2 years ago, this is a year where Mooney could have 100 receptions. So I'm going to go 100 receptions for around 1,300, 1,400 yards. And I think I'm going to agree with you with that touchdown rate. I think 7 or 8 touchdowns is probably more realistic, assuming he's getting more opportunities. So I think he could put up, honestly, one of the better stat lines of a Bears receiver in the past 5 to 10 years. I believe Mooney is going to come in with vengeance, with a great connection with Justin Fields, and I believe we're going to see them connect a lot. So seeing Mooney have back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, I think is most definitely in the picture, assuming he can stay healthy. And I think that would be a very good stat line, even for any normal wide receiver one heading into this season. We don't like to be too negative on this show, but before we close it out, we're going to discuss this just slightly. Parth, obviously, there's a chance this doesn't work out. With everything we're taking into consideration, Mooney is also going to have much tougher defenders on him in a multitude of games throughout the 2022 season. And there's a chance, there's always a chance whenever you're talking about the Chicago Bears, that this absolutely fizzes out. So if Mooney doesn't work out as the top guy, if he's not the potential wide receiver one that we all see, what do you see the Bears doing moving forward at the wide receiver position, taking into consideration that they have over $100 million in cap space, as well as, you would assume, if it doesn't work out well, a high draft pick in the first round in 2023?
Yeah, I mean, for this to not go well could also go 2 ways. That could mean Justin Fields wasn't looking as good also, which could be very concerning also going into the draft, as you'd have to look at quarterback options too if it came to that point. I don't want it to come to that point. I know Bears fans are tired of all that.
Yeah, we gave Mitch 4 years. I think Justin's just fine.
Yeah, maybe, but it just depends on how bad it goes again. It was a different regime. I feel like this regime's a lot more stricter than the last regime, that's for sure. But if it doesn't pan out for Mooney, at least for being a top tier wide receiver one, or even being a good wide receiver one, I think the Bears got to look at free agency. Like you said, we have a lot of money next year, and there's gonna be a good amount of free agents that the Bears can look at, especially at the wide receiver market. The draft was something I was looking at this year, that the Bears could have added someone, but a lot of wide receivers decided to fall early, and there was a lot of talent at the wide receiver position this year at the draft. I mean, I could start naming a bunch of players. But next year, I would look at someone like, DJ Chark, Juju Smith-Schuster, who's on a 1-year deal with Kansas City. I think he's going to have a pretty good year also this with Kansas City this year with Pat Mahomes. But if the Bears really wanted to, they'd have to also focus on the draft. Also see how Justin's developing also, because if he's not developing as well with Mooney, then what's up with the offense? And we've been asking that question for at least for the last 50 years. So hopefully they can get it together. I think they can. I think Justin and Mooney have shown us a pretty good, hope into the future, especially from the last couple of games last year.
Yeah, I think something pretty catastrophic would have to happen for this not to at least go moderately well. I think worst comes to worst, the Bears sign someone next offseason, or maybe drafts a stud in the top 16 picks, and maybe Mooney gets downgraded back to wide receiver 2. However, a name that I think we'd be dumb not to keep an eye on, the top wide receiver in the 2023 free agency class, is Deebo Samuel. He's someone who spoke about wanting to get out of San Francisco for a while. It didn't end up happening this offseason. We're not sure if he's going to report to training camp. So that's something to keep an eye on as well. And watching him and Mooney play in years in the future would be a lot of fun.
DK Metcalf is also going to be a free agent, actually. So that's another eye I would look out for, because I know he'd probably want to get out of Seattle with Drew Lock at quarterback.
Yeah, I think moral of the story, regardless of how this season goes, the Bears are going to have a ton of cap space. I believe they have the most in the league right now heading into next year by a wide margin. Obviously, they do have to sign Roquan Smith, probably to the biggest linebacker deal in the league currently. However, they're going to have a lot of assets to play with next year. So heading into 2023, I think the Bears could most definitely get rapidly better. Should be exciting to see how Darnell Mooney plays throughout the entirety of the season, though. I know a lot of Bears fans, including ourselves, have a lot of belief in him. Thank you guys so much for tuning into episode number 186 of Uncut. If you want Bears content, multiple videos, articles, written content, social media content, each and every week, do us a favor, drop a like, subscribe, and follow wherever you may be listening. If you would like to find more content from us, head to our website, bearddown.com. Once training camp gets fired up here in just about 10 days, we are going to be starting writing on our website, giving you guys more in-depth content and analysis about this team heading closer to the regular season. If you would like to find the podcast on Instagram and Twitter, you can find us on both platforms at Beared Down. And finally, you can find the links to our personal social media pages down in the description for myself, as well as Parth. Wrong way I'm pointing. I got to get used to being back home, but Parth's over there. So be sure to check out our social media pages. It's another great way to interact with us, and you can see our thoughts on all things Bears, the entirety of the National Football League, as well as all of Chicago sports. Parth Shaw, feels good to be doing this again, getting right back into our bread and butter with training camp coming up here soon. September is going to be here before we know it, so I'm super excited. But any last words before we sign off here?
Yeah, I'm super excited for football season to be back this year. Right now, all we have is baseball, and which actually just started up again after the All-Star break. So thank God it's back, because it was a dry 2 days with no sports.
That's the expectations people have for your White Sox. That team might be on life control right now.
We're on life support, but you know, we got. There's some chance. There's a lot of hope on the south side, and it ain't over till it's over. And they just did come off a very impressive weekend in Minnesota with a 3-1 series win. So it should be exciting to see what happens in the second half. Baseball is always a long 162 games. You gotta play them all out. So I'm excited to see what happens in the next 81. That's for sure.
And there's about nothing to look forward to with the Cubs.
Yeah.
But I have enjoyed going to some baseball games this summer. And
there's some great prospects in the farm system for the Cubs. You know what? I'll give them that. The Cubs have done a good job with that. Hopefully you guys keep Wilson Contreras, because that would be very sad.
Yeah, hopefully it doesn't all implode like it seemingly feels like it has done with the Bears. People have to keep their hopes up about this Chicago Bears team. The defensive unit's going to be solid. A lot's going to come down to the offense, as it always does. So excited to get out to training camp, see everything in action, and look forward to a great 2022 season regardless of the outcome. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in once again. It's been a pleasure to be your host. My name is Chris Maltby, and that is pretty much it for us. We are signing off, and as always, Bears fans, do us a favor and continue to stay safe and bear down. We'll see you in the next one. Peace out.